right, so get ready, because today we're heading north, way north, to the Arctic. You guys send in a ton of articles about Trump's latest statement.
Oh, yeah, the one where he's calling Greenland an absolute necessity for American security.
Yeah, exactly. Sounds kind of familiar, though, right?
Definitely echoes his whole attempt to buy the island back in 2019.
But this time, it feels like, I don't know, there's this added sense of urgency.
It's not just about Trump wanting to, add to his real estate portfolio anymore.
The whole Arctic situation is getting, this figuratively, of course, a lot hotter. Russia and China are making some pretty bold moves, and the U.S. seems to be, well, scrambling to keep up.
New military bases. Advanced fighter jets.
Oh, and let's not forget the race for resources as the ice melts.
Right, it's like a whole new geopolitical chessboard up there, with Greenland right in the center.
Okay, so let's start with Trump's statement. Why this sudden urgency? What's fueling this whole national security and freedom angle when it comes to Greenland?
Well, if you kind of read between the lines of what Trump's saying, you can see a couple of anxieties, I guess you could say, bubbling to the surface. First, there's Russia.
Okay, so Russia.
They've been getting more and more assertive in the Arctic, that's for sure.
And they haven't exactly been quiet about it either.
Been building up their military presence for years.
Right, and they keep talking about this massive icebreaker fleet they have, right?
Exactly. Russia has the world's biggest and most advanced fleet of nuclear-powered icebreakers.
Okay, so what's the big deal about icebreakers? They're just ships for breaking ice, right?
Well, yeah, but these icebreakers are different. They're behemoths. They can cut through thick Arctic ice like it's butter, keep shipping lanes open all year round.
Ah, so it's about control.
Exactly. They essentially control these vital transportation routes. And as the Arctic ice melts...
Those routes become even more important.
Exactly. Commercially, strategically,
yeah.
Russia is really setting themselves up to dominate those routes. Huge advantage in terms of trade and, of course, military movement.
So Russia's playing the long game with these icebreakers. But what about their actual, military moves?
Well, on top of the icebreakers, they've been building and modernizing military bases along their Arctic coastline, deploying specialized Arctic troops, even increasing their submarine patrols.
And this is all aimed at?
Asserting dominance in the region, deterring any potential challengers, NATO, the U.S.
And that's where Greenland comes in.
Right.
It's strategically located between North America and Europe. It's
prime real estate, geopolitically speaking.
So Trump's basically saying that Russia's actions are a direct threat to U.S. interests, and that Greenland is the key to, countering that threat.
You got it. Greenland gives you a crucial vantage point for keeping an eye on Russian activity. And it's an ideal location for the U.S. to deploy forces.
Right. We already have Sewell Air Base in Greenland.
Mm-hmm. Which houses a critical ballistic missile early warning system.
Hold on. Ballistic missile early warning system.
Mm-hmm.
Break that down for us. What exactly does that mean?
Basically, it's a network of radar installations designed to detect and track intercontinental ballistic missiles launched from anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere.
So Thul's location basically lets it spot any potential launches from Russia.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Gives the U.S. those precious minutes to react.
So for Trump, Russia's Arctic ambitions are a direct threat to U.S. security, and having a strong presence in Greenland is essential to counter that.
That's his logic, yes.
But there's another player in this whole Arctic situation, right? One we haven't even talked about yet. China.
Oh, right, China.
They've been calling themselves a near-Arctic state, which I've always thought was, well, a bit of a stretch geographically.
A bit, yeah. But you gotta give them credit. Geography aside, China's taking a very strategic approach to the Arctic.
So how are they playing this?
Big investments.
Yeah.
Scientific research, infrastructure development, resource exploration.
They're seeing the Arctic as, a future economic and strategic hub.
And they're not afraid to spend big to get a piece of the action.
And let's not forget their little partnership with Russia, right? Joint military exercises, economic partnerships, the whole shebang.
Oh, absolutely. China and Russia, they see a lot of shared interests in the Arctic, particularly when it comes to, challenging U.S. dominance.
Makes sense. 2 against 1 and all that.
They've been conducting joint naval patrols, sharing intelligence, even coordinating their Arctic strategies.
Which, from the U.S. perspective, is
a major concern, represents a combined force that could potentially, outmaneuver them in the region.
Okay, so we've got Russia flexing its muscles, China playing the long game, and the U.S. feeling a little bit squeezed. Sounds like Trump's anxiety about Greenland isn't just paranoia, It's a reflection of a changing power dynamic in the Arctic.
Exactly. The Arctic is the new frontier in the global power struggle. And Trump's pronouncements about Greenland, well, they're just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay, that was a good one. But if Greenland is this crucial piece of the Arctic puzzle, what's the U.S. actually doing to, secure its position?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. The U.S. has definitely been upping their game. I mean, deploying F-35 fighter jets to Greenland, upgrading bases, and, conducting large-scale military exercises like Operation Noble Defender with Canada.
Oh, yeah, I read about that. It sounds like they're making a pretty strong statement. What's the deal with these F-35s anyway? Are they really all that special, or are they just, like, fancy, expensive jets?
Oh, they're definitely more than just fancy. The F-35 is a fifth-generation fighter jet. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a whole other level. Technologically speaking, way ahead of anything Russia's got up in the Arctic right now.
Okay, so, like, next level. How so?
Well, for one, they have advanced stealth capabilities.
So they're like ninjas, basically,
Yeah.
invisible to radar.
Pretty much. They're super hard for enemy radar to detect. And then on top of that, they have these sophisticated sensor systems that can track and target multiple threats at once.
So it's like they're the superheroes of fighter jets.
You could say that. And deploying them to Greenland, well, it sends a pretty clear message to Russia. The U.S. is not backing down from the Arctic.
Gotcha. So not just about showing off fancy jets, but about, strategic positioning.
Exactly. But it's not just about military power, right? We can't forget about what's under all that ice.
You mean like resources?
Yeah, Greenland's sitting on a gold mine, literally. Well, not just gold, but, minerals, tons of them. Gold, silver, copper, uranium. Plus you've got rare earth elements, the stuff that all our modern tech relies on.
Right, right. And of course, there's the whole thing about oil and gas reserves off the coast.
Exactly. And as the climate changes, as that ice melts, all of that becomes more and more accessible, which makes Greenland even more valuable.
It's like a modern-day gold rush, but with icebergs instead of mountains.
Uh-huh. Yeah, something like that. But, this whole scramble for resources, it puts a lot of pressure on Greenland itself.
Oh, totally. I mean, they're caught in the middle of this geopolitical tug of war, trying to balance their own interests with, these global superpowers breathing down their neck.
And don't forget, Greenland is autonomous. It's part of the Kingdom of Denmark, but it has its own government, its own parliament.
And they made it pretty clear back in 2019 that they weren't for sale.
Exactly. They want to decide their own future. They're not interested in being anyone's pawn.
So how do they navigate this? I mean, it's a pretty tricky situation to be in. They're a small player on a, world stage with all these heavy hitters.
Well, they're playing a smart game, trying to diversify their partnerships, engaging with countries like China and the U.S., but also maintaining their strong ties with Denmark and the EU.
It's like they're walking a tightrope.
That's a great way to put it. And it's a tightrope walk that's only going to get trickier as tensions in the Arctic rise.
Yeah, for sure. We've been talking about the current situation, but this whole U.S. interest in Greenland, it's not exactly new, is it?
Nope, not at all. Actually, looking back at the history, it adds a really interesting layer to this whole thing.
Right. The sources mentioned attempts to, acquire Greenland going all the way back to the 1800s. I mean, there was even a formal offer from President Truman in 1946.
Yeah, it seems like this fascination with Greenland, it's kind of been a recurring theme in U.S. foreign policy.
So why the obsession? What is it about Greenland that keeps drawing the U.S. in?
Well, it goes back to that strategic importance, right? Its location, the potential it has as, a buffer against perceived threats. I mean, back during the Cold War, Greenland was seen as this crucial line of defense against the Soviet Union.
And now, with Russia resurgent and China on the rise, well, that strategic importance is back in the spotlight.
It's history repeating itself, in a way, just with, new players and higher stakes.
Right, right, higher stakes. But you know what? It's not just history repeating. There's a difference this time around.
Oh, yeah, a big one.
What's that?
Well, in the past, the U.S. could kind of just dictate terms, assert their interests without really caring about, local perspectives. But today, Greenland is a much more assertive player. They want a say in what happens. They're making their own decisions about their future.
So it's not just about, this power struggle between these big countries. It's also about a small nation finding its voice, demanding to be heard.
Absolutely. And it really begs the question, what does all this mean for the future of the Arctic and the global balance of power?
That's the big question, isn't it? We've covered a lot of ground here. Trump's anxieties about Russia, China's ambitions, Greenland trying to walk this tightrope. So for our listeners, like, what's the main takeaway?
The Arctic's becoming a major player in global geopolitics, that's for sure. I mean, it used to be this remote, almost forgotten region, but not anymore.
Melting ice, new shipping routes, resources. Suddenly everyone's interested.
Exactly. And that puts Greenland, with its strategic location and all those resources, right in the middle of it all.
So they're kind of at the heart of this geopolitical storm, huh?
You could say that. And the decisions they make, their people, their government, they're going to have ripple effects way beyond just the Arctic.
So this isn't just about, like, who gets the oil or who has the biggest icebreakers.
It's about global trade, security, even the balance of power between nations.
Big stuff. So for our listeners who've been with us this whole time, what's the big picture?
Well, the big picture is the world's changing, and the Arctic is like a, I don't know, like a snapshot of those changes. The old rules, they don't apply anymore.
New players, new game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The U.S. isn't calling all the shots like they used to, and they're having to, adapt, change their strategies, think about alliances in new ways.
Seems like we're entering this whole new era of, like, great power competition. And the Arctic's main battleground.
You got it. And to really make sense of the world today, you got to understand what's going on up there in the Arctic, the competing interests, the history, the potential for things to, escalate.
Yeah, it's complicated stuff. But hopefully, we've at least given our listeners a sense of why Greenland's suddenly making headlines and why it matters, like really matters.
We've talked about the military strategy, the economic stuff, the political maneuvering, but there's this one thing we haven't really touched on yet.
What's that?
The people.
Right, the people who actually live in Greenland. I mean, what's it like for them with all this tension? What are their thoughts on, what the future holds?
That's a great question to think about, because Greenland isn't just, a piece of land on a map or some strategic asset. It's a society. It's got a rich culture, a history tied to the Arctic environment.
And the Inuit people, who make up most of Greenland's population, they have this deep connection to the land.
They see these changes happening all around them from a completely different perspective.
So, as we wrap things up here, I want to leave our listeners with this thought. The future of the Arctic, it's not just going to be decided by these powerful nations. It's also going to be shaped by the people who call it home.
Their resilience, their wisdom.
Their voices deserve to be heard, their perspectives understood, and their interests protected as this whole new chapter in the Arctic unfolds.